Hello everyone, good morning or good afternoon. I don't know which hour of the day you're watching this video, but welcome to my presentation about the CSS box model. My name is Leonardo Barbosa, and we're going to learn more about the ways we can use the CSS box model for our CSS stylization, best practices, some examples, and take a look at the model itself, okay? So for this presentation, here are the following topics. We're going to learn about what is the CSS box model, the CSS box model in an image just to make sure it's easier to explain, to understand the concepts, and the 4 layers inside the CSS box model, like the content, the padding, the border, the margin, why should we use the CSS box model, and some examples about why it's important, how we can use it, so it's pretty clear for us the best use of this application, okay, this model. So what is the CSS box model? The CSS box model refers to the composition of a web page or HTML page from blocks or boxes using CSS. In web development, the CSS box model is like the most important part through stylization. Specifically, the box model describes how the size of each such block and its content is determined through styling instructions, okay? The box model refers to the usually invisible rectangular area that is created for each HTML element. This area has 4 basic components, and as you can see in this image, it's much easier to explain with what's saying around here. So normally the only large and visible area of any HTML element is the content area. We're going to discuss about each component, starting from the inside and working our way out. In other words, from the innermost part, from the content, into the outermost part, which is the margin. Okay, so we have the content, the padding, the border, and the margin. So about the content, what do we have inside the content? The content portion of the box model holds, as you guessed it, the actual content. As we discussed and learned in Developer Forum and the CAT tutorial quizzes about HTML elements, the content can be text, images, or whatever else is visible on a web page. For example, forms, menus, links, etc. Okay? Also, it can be declared in CSS coding with the width and height declarations. For example, inside the CSS stylization property, you can use the width to define pixels, number of widths, and the same applies for the height. Okay? About padding. The padding of an element is defined using the padding property. The padding basically is the space around the content. Okay? It can be defined for individual side. For example, padding left 20 pixels, like it said here, or I can define for all 4 sides in one declaration. For example, in padding we have here like 20 pixels, 10 pixels, 30 pixels, 20 pixels. Often when a CSS property takes multiple values like this, they start at the top and go clockwise in relation to the element. So in this example just cited here, this would apply 20 pixels of padding to the top, 10 pixels to the right, 30 pixels to the bottom, and 20 pixels to the left. Above the border of elements defined using the border property. This is a shorthand property that defines the element's border width, border style, and border color. For example, I can use this property here in the CSS stylization and say like the border has 4 pixels as width, the border style is dashed, and the border color is orange. Finally, the last part of the box model is the element's margin. Margins are similar to padding and are defined using similar syntax. For example, margin left, 15 pixels, or margin with the go clockwise stuff, go with the 10 pixels, 20 pixels, 10 pixels, and 20 pixels. However, unlike padding, the margin portion of the element exists outside the element. A margin creates space between the target element and surrounding elements. Why should we use the CSS box model? The CSS box model is basically the foundation of the layout in the website. Each element in a website, for example, H1, H2, P, divs, etc., is represented as a rectangular box, with the box content, padding, border, and margin built up around one to another, just like the layers of an onion. As a browser renders a web page layout, it works out what styles are applied to the content of each box, how big the surrounding onion layers are, and where the boxes sit in relation to one another. Before understanding how to create CSS layouts, you really need to understand this box model. Okay, so basically this onion example I think makes really easy to understand, as we have a lot of layers of onions here. We can apply different layers inside of our CSS content to make sure we have the best visual eye refreshing. Make sure you don't have any problems with the way your elements are allocated inside of your website. Okay. And to finish, we're going to take a look at a few examples about the application of the CSS box model that we talked before. Okay, so for this example, I've created an HTML file, which is called an example, I guess. Index.html of this box model example. Okay, so you can see it's really simple. I created a doc type declaration. There's the head, the body, and we create some elements here. Okay, so there are like this header one, which is the name of our CSS box model tutorial. We create two divs, which is the first one we attributed a class called experiment, and the second class is baseline, just to make sure we can learn a different application inside here. Okay, so here is our example. Also, we have a CSS style sheet, and inside of the style sheet we have some specifications we put on here. Like for the experiment, we put the width of 400 pixels, the height of 80 pixels, the background color of red, and the baseline of 400 pixels and the 80 pixels, and the background color of yellow. Okay, so here is our CSS box experiment. Really simple. Okay, so we're going to add some styles in this top div, this experiment one. Okay, just to make sure we can see how the width, height, and spacing are affected when we apply the CSS box models concepts that I've presented to you. So for example, in this div experiment, we're going to add the padding. Okay, so what about the content? The content, as I talked before, it's about this width and height elements. So with these width elements, we now define the amount of pixels used for our content, which is inside here, this text, our experiment. Okay, so now we're going to add the padding. So how do we add padding here? We just put in padding. Now you were going to put some pixels here. Okay, so now we're going to save this, and when we add this and refresh our browser, note that our content inside this element no longer is at the edge of our container. So comparing with the second div, for example, this first div now has 10 pixels spacing in all four sides. See, like from here, where I see the letter O, you have this amount of spacing around about 10 pixels that per before, different from this one. So this is the padding. Okay. Now for the border, we're going to add the border property in our CSS. So we put border, and we're going to put here 10 pixels. The style would be solid, and the color would be gray. Okay. Now we're going to save this and refresh our browser, and look at that. Now you'll see we have the border with 10 pixels spacing on all four sides of our elements. And finally, let's add a margin. Okay, so now we're going to take it down here. Let's for this presentation, I'll put margin in all spaces, but only for the bottom. Okay, so we're going to put the margin bottom here. We're going to add 10 pixels. And now we're going to save it. Let's see what's going to happen. Now, as you can see, this margin added space to the outside of our element. So, and now I have 10 pixels of spacing from the margin bottom from our second div. And this is how you can define the CSS box model in your elements. You can, even if you want, add the margin for all the elements, not only for the bottom. You can add for the classes just like you did before, or some particular elements inside of your CSS style sheet. Okay. Another example is from a website that I really like, I think everyone knows, which is the Instagram. Okay. So inside of Instagram, we have some really good examples of the usage of the CSS box model. Like I have this picture of Salvador, which is a place in Brazil, which is our content. Around here, we got our paddings, we got our borders, and also look at the margin between these elements, between the stories, the suggestions, and the picture itself. We have the margin to make sure there's a lot of space, the search box, so you can see the CSS box model is really used around, every website has it. You just need to know how to define better to make sure it's a really good and really clear presentation for website for the users. Okay, and that's my presentation for you. Well, thank you for participating, for watching this video. I'm sorry for my English, I was really pretty nervous for that, but I hope you could understand a little bit more about the CSS box model. See you later.